headsets with them going on.
Had to save the oil companies. They were all going to go bust. I said, this is the first time I've ever said we got to get it up a little bit. I actually called Russia and the King of Saudi Arabia. We had a three-way call, and we cut back on the oil because it was so incredible. I had to save the oil companies. They were
Oh boy, there's a volume problem. We can't hear you. Power 96 says you're on mute. Good morning. There is an issue that we have with some folks saying that they are tired of the former president, twice impeached, four times indicted former president who was found to be $91 million in debt twice because of sexual assault. I could go on and on and on. But the reason why we feel that certain things are necessary in bringing you information on this guy, people have such short memories with so much going on. And it's important that you stay informed and that others stay informed as they consider this guy. And yesterday, for instance, was a good example. Greer called me yesterday. Wait, what is this I'm hearing? They dropped all the charges against Trump, or they dropped the charges, they threw out the case, et cetera, in Georgia. Because a newspaper, and I won't mention the newspaper's name, not that I even remember the newspaper's name. See, you got to keep informed. Kind of blared a headline that suggested that the charges against Trump was dropped, when in actuality, and broken down, three charges against him were dismissed. At the same time, that left a couple of things. He's hit with what, 41 counts in Georgia alone. You drop the three, he still got 38 felony counts. stand-in. But the judge said the prosecutor can refile those charges. It's just that they made some tactical or clerical errors, and if they want to refile it, they can. Those three. So what? So of course, the supporters of the cult leader himself will have you believe what a great win this was, when in fact it was a procedural error. And I was looking at the coverage of it, and I can see where it's misleading. And so you got to be informed. You have to be informed. There was 3 charges against Trump himself that were dismissed. He still faces the racketeering counts, which carries forever in prison, a sentence of forever in prison. The thing to watch out for today, though, when it comes to um, Jim Jones 2.0, or Tangerine Tyrant, as Mike V says, is his favorite judge down in Florida in this documents case, the document case that I continue to argue, even though he has committed, or apparently has committed, some serious crimes with these documents. As we heard him there pre-show, right? As the show coming on, he was bragging about something so nefarious, getting together with Russia, because of course, he's Putin's little girlfriend, a play toy anyway, and Saudi Arabia to do what they did. But this guy, it wasn't a win for Trump yesterday. Today, though, is Eileen Cannon is going to decide whether to dismiss the documents case. She's going to rule today whether the case dismiss on that. Now, again, if you don't know Eileen Cannon, she is an avowed MAGA supporter, appointed by Trump, in love with Trump, and has been ruling. Her rulings have even had Republicans scratching their head. Her rulings in Trump's favor. So today she's going to decide, or she's expected to decide, whether that case can move forward or not, whether she's going to dismiss it outright. And that's okay, in my view anyway, because it only means that they can just get down to business, get to the January 6th case with Judge Chutkan in DC. It means they can get down to business. And McAfee down in Georgia needs to just go ahead and say, listen, Fonnie Willis, you may have been a little, might not look good for you that your boyfriend was hired, et cetera, but it has nothing to do with the Trump case. Let's just move forward there too. But Eileen Cannon has been holding the cards anyway. So let's move her aside, because again, I've said this, and David knows I'm right. If she dismisses the charges, or if Special Counsel Jack Smith decides to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to drop the charges, doesn't mean that they can't bring it back later. It's no double jeopardy attached at all. And I've argued that he should drop the charges to get Eileen Cannon out of the way for now. Get the other convictions, and then come back later and deal with that. That's been my argument. Later this morning, at the top of the hour, in fact, we're going to have the one and only Sam P.K. Collins from the Washington Informer join us with DC Justice Lab's attorney, Patrice Sulton. Crime bills. The DC crime bill, particularly, we're going to talk about, but there have been crime bills popping up all around the country. And remember, black folks been really holding Biden feet to the fire over something he did or he was involved in 30, 40 years ago, a crime bill. And now DC Mayor Muriel Bowser happily signed the DC crime bill. And ever since George Floyd, when everyone was claiming and pushing for criminal justice reform, those shouts turned to whispers, and those whispers have gone away. We're going to talk about that today. And Congress also, hey, you TikTok lovers, Congress passed a bill to ban TikTok yesterday. Now, President Biden, who has been running some seriously interesting ads, campaign ads on TikTok, said if the Senate passes it, he's going to sign it. And they will ban TikTok in America. The music industry, on the other hand, has experienced a notable improvement in female artists topping the Billboard charts and earning more recognition for their contributions, particularly women of color. We got that story for you too. And Don Lemon isn't going to have a show on X or Twitter after he and Elon Musk got into it in an interview. That is extremely interesting. Mike B says the Tangerine Tyrant has his own crime bill when he wanted to have the Central Park Five executed for crimes they never committed, and folks still support him. This is what kills me when you have Snoop smoking too much weed, saying, I'm down, I roll or I rock with Trump is what he said. He freed my man Harry O. When Harry O, as a House Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries pointed out, Harry O sold all that poison to the black community, killing so many. That kills people. Remember Lean On Me, the movie? Crack kills the brains, and it kills you. And yet, Snoop is rocking with Trump because he pardoned Harry O. Of course he would pardon Harry O. It's like the slave master would see a slave, see one slave going overboard to please the master by torturing the other slave. The master gets a kick out of that. And yes, Power 96, part of the discussion this morning, he says you need to read the new Louisiana crime bill. Jeff Landry went full Jim Crow, using your juvenile records to banning parole. It is a mess down there. Yes, it is. Indeed, it is. Another thing I wanted to mention this morning, too. Greer sent this to me last night, late last night, I might add. We're in Washington, by the way, for our Black Press Week. But she sent me this clip yesterday, and it was a very heated discussion, interesting discussion. And in fact, the National Newspaper Publicists Association's general counsel, Scott Bolden, was a part of that conversation with Roland Martin. And they discussed paying student athletes the NILs, those image use payments that the athletes and the student athletes are now getting, name and likeness. And they made some great points that I've been saying. Roland made the point too. Angel Reese probably wishes she had 4 more years of school because of the money she's making, because she's not going to make that money in the WNBA. But these coaches making $11.5 million or more a year, even assistant coaches, Roland was pointing out, making $2, $3, $4 million a year off the backs of these players. It's been going on forever. And now that they have this name and likeness situation where the players, deservedly so, you ever watch college basketball and college football, and they are jam packed. And college football, many, not some, many college football stadiums pack in more than the NFL. David says he's always supported athletes getting paid. These guys, they come in, and these student athletes, these guys and females come in. They put their body in harm's way constantly. They risk injury, career-threatening injuries, and many of them, right, are not going to go on to professional sports, right? They're not going to the NBA. They're not going to the NFL. Only a select few do that. But they're still making so much money for these colleges and universities. And I get that they go there and they get a free ride as far as education is concerned. And you probably, in some instances, in some of these major universities, you're probably talking about $250,000 or more a year, or whatever. I guess that's what they charge or whatever. And I don't know what it costs to go to those major schools, but I'm guessing probably about $250,000. Even if that's the case, that is not even a tip of the iceberg of what that student athlete is bringing to, as far as the money is concerned, what that student athlete is bringing in. And this begrudging, and you're using their name and likeness. He also mentioned something I thought was very interesting too. EA Sports. Now, Oscar Robertson played 50 years ago, and they were using his name and likeness. Why shouldn't Oscar Robertson family benefit from that? It's insane because it's that mentality. It's the mentality. And yeah, the girl said that you can't tell me that this has nothing to do with what Emmitt Smith and the NAACP are coming out and telling black players not to attend in Florida. And Power 96, this is what Roland was talking about. He says Nick Saban makes $11.3 million, and he took that in after taxes. And he quit because some of his players wanted to be paid. And you know the situation in Florida. Look, they have noticed the black athlete making a lot of money in school. Finally, being paid and still not getting what they deserve to be paid. And now it's a problem. You got all these rich white men sitting back saying, they need these athletes, breed black athletes. They need to come to school and and get them prepared for life, and it shouldn't be about money. Well, it's about money for you. And if I'm coming from a household that's struggling to make ends meet, as it were, mama can't pay rent, I got all this talent. You want me, you and a boatload of other colleges and universities trying to convince me to attend your school. Where's as Roland said, run me my check. That's about it. Power 96 mentions the Alabama football program made $130 million last year. And Alabama's long been a powerhouse. 130 million. So give it a rest. Give it a rest. Oh gosh. Nonetheless, TikTok is being kicked off. What do y'all feel about TikTok? How do you feel about TikTok if they ban TikTok, if the Senate agrees with the House and go for it and ban TikTok? The bill was passed yesterday, and that the viral video sharing platform owned by a China-based company, and it was a bipartisan thing. Both Democrats and Republicans alike voted in favor of this. We got Sam P.K. Collins. He's already here. Sam is like, you know what? Y'all invite me to come on at 8. I'm coming on early. I'm gonna get there early. I'm not gonna mess around. Sam is not on CP time. Sam wants to weigh in on the TikTok. Where's my man Sam? Sam is like the coolest journalist there is. What's going on, Sam?
Peace and blessings, Stacy. How you doing? Can you hear me?
Man, it's always good to see Sam.
Good. Likewise. Thanks for inviting me. Happy
Absolutely.
press
Sam,
week.
we're gonna get to the big issue in a bit once Miss Sulton, attorney Patrice Sulton, arrives. Um, but this TikTok situation, Sam, any thoughts on that? They're saying that TikTok. Why? Let me ask you this: why
Sure.
was TikTok? Is it simply because they are China based that they were picked on here?
I think that's part of it. I'm a bit ambivalent about TikTok, seeing that in this age of mass information, social media has been a tool that marginalized people have used to spread information to circumvent traditional media. And uh, by virtue of TikTok being Chinese, that could be part of it. As we know, the United States is currently in a lot of conflict. Mind you, it's not necessarily physical, but if not with China, then definitely with Russia. So any opportunity to push away Chinese influence, the United States will take that. And there have been studies about the type of content that Chinese TikTok users see versus US TikTok users. So whereas our children are learning dance moves and are laughing at videos, Chinese TikTok users are learning more educational material. But going back to the original point, social media in general has always been a tool to raise people's awareness about what the elites might not want us to see. On the other side of that coin, TikTok has also been a place for the spread of misinformation, especially as it relates to African people in the United States trying to make more sense of their history. So it's a bit of a nuanced issue, but at the heart of it is the United States' attempt to buttress any Chinese influence and what may come with that via TikTok.
So, Sam, why didn't we see a push to ban Twitter with all of the Russian? It was proven that they were a propaganda machine for Russia during the 2016 election.
I mean, that's a very good question. I can't really speak to that. What I will say is I think that Elon Musk has some part in that. I think that
Well,
Elon
this was
Musk,
pre-Elon, though, the 2016.
definitely, definitely, without question. It was, at the same time, I think that with his purchase of it, it's become a hotbed once again for conservative talking points and conservative organizing. So, uh, I'm understanding that the U.S. political system as a whole is a hotbed for moderates. So there's a bit of touch and go with that, and I can't really tell you exactly why. This is all speculation on my side, of course, but I do believe wholeheartedly that Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter, what they now call X, played a part in that. In the United States, you have a game with the elites. There's race, but of course, there's always a matter of power and influence by way of who has money and who owns the most property.
Yeah, and before we get to the top of the hour, I want to bring this up too. Really, it's Women's History Month, and so no better time for this, Sam. The music industry has experienced a notable improvement in female artists topping the Billboard charts and earning more recognition for their contributions to various genres. Women across all musical genres were honored at Billboard Women in Music for their commitment to their craft and pushing culture forward with their unique sounds. You have Victoria Monet, Ice Spice, Glorilla, Coco Jones, and other female artists were there who accepted their awards and supported their peers. In a recent Spotify supported study from the UFC Edinburgh Inclusion Initiative found that at the end of last year, solo female artists filled 41% of spots on the Billboard Hot 100 year-end chart, and that rise in female representation also spans across music's behind-the-scenes role because the percentage of female songwriters jumped to 5.5%, really because of the increase in women of color receiving a songwriting credit last year. So we're finally seeing a lot of movement now in the music industry in which women are finally getting or starting to get, because it's a long way from them completely getting their just due, but they're finally getting it, Sam.
And I think that speaks to the changing tide. I think that speaks to, once again, the democratization of media and how women, they have always been the original entrepreneurs, the original market women. So with them being able to parlay their talents and to not only delve into music, but to delve into, once again, social media and into fashion and sort of combine all of that to wield influence. A lot of these women are playmakers in a sense, and that's how they've been able to move up on the charts. So I think it's a testament not only to that, but it's a testament to a sentiment that's growing and continues to grow all across the nation around women's rights and around further centering the viewpoints of women who have felt marginalized and who have been marginalized, within the music industry and within other sectors of society. So we see a changing of the tide in that sense. And I, for one, welcome it. I am going to be balanced in saying that there is criticism out there about the content. I am happy to see that, in addition to Ice Spice, we do have Coco Jones, so there's a bit of balance there.
Yeah.
I really do appreciate that. I'm not going to weigh in too much and give my thoughts on, the content, because
Yeah,
I am a
yeah.
proponent
Me
of free
too.
speech, of course, but at the very same time, there is that criticism out there. And sometimes I do think that some of it can be a bit, dipped in sexism to some extent, but there is a concern nonetheless. But just going back to the original point, what we're seeing right now in the music industry is just like what we're seeing in the corporate world, what we're seeing in the political realm. Every realm, women, especially women of color, and I'll go as far as saying Black women, are showing what they have, and they are accumulating power and accumulating influence, and it's about time, And once again, we're going back to the original market woman, women who have taken their talents, who have taken their skills, and brought what they had.
Yeah, we saw, we talked about this too, Jay-Z at the Grammys discussing or talking about, I should say, the fact that his wife, who is arguably the biggest, uh, one of the biggest stars ever in music, never winning a Best Album award. Yet, under the surface, bubbling up under the surface, is that women are finally getting their just due, which is, well overdue. So here we are. Sam, here's a conversation I definitely want you to lead. Sam has done I mean, if he doesn't win awards for his work on the DC crime bill situation and other stories that he continues to do, that is uh, absolutely amazing. Read the Washington Informer. Every week, the Informer seems to have about 4 stories on the front page. Sam usually has at least 3 of those 4, if not all 4 at times, because he is truly plugged in and he's truly that good. But the Secure DC Omnibus Amendment Act of 2024 was officially signed by Mayor Muriel Bowser. And on March 5th, the DC Council had voted again to approve the legislation. The passage was nearly unanimous, with Ward 8 Councilman Trayon White abstaining from the vote, marking himself present as he did for the first vote. The mayor called it a day of celebration, saying Secure DC will help us rebalance the safety ecosystem. And the bill includes about 100 different measures. Here to talk about it with Sam is an attorney from the DC Justice Lab. You all know her well, Patrice Sulton. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Morning.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Glad that you could join us this morning. I'm going to throw the first question out, then I'm going to let Sam Collins, the expert, take over. Patrice, after George Floyd, Patrice, and I think we keep losing Patrice's picture. Are you there, Patrice?
I'm here.
Attorney Sultan, are you there?
I'm here.
You're there. Okay. After George Floyd, there was all this talk about criminal justice reform. That talk has totally died, and now we're getting really the opposite of criminal justice reform. What's happening, Attorney Patrice?
I wouldn't say that that talk has totally died. I would say that our leadership in this city is not being responsive to what is still a really vocal demand. We've had thousands of people testify that this is not the right direction for public safety, not just because it's wildly inhumane and unfair, but because it's incredibly ineffective. And what we've learned through this Secure DC legislation is that those voices pale in comparison to the voices of a few select government officials when it comes to decision making by our mayor and by our council. And it's one thing to show up and listen to people, but it's another thing to disregard everything that they say and just follow what the U.S. Attorney's Office tells you to do. At this point, the U.S. Attorney's Office is puppeteering our legislature.
Final question.
Sam, I'm going to throw it to you because I know you have been all over this. And I know a conversation with you and Patrice are it's something that everybody wants to hear. So I'm gonna throw it to you, Sam.
No, without question. Good to see you once again, Patrice. Thank you so much for coming on. Given so now it's signed into law. What's next? Because the council said it's not over. People who are in the grassroots are not going to stop fighting. You, of course, have been very vocal about provisions in the bill. What's next as far as this bill and just crime prevention in general?
Well, a lot of large cities across the country that experienced a surge in crime during the pandemic were able to turn the corner last year and start to see some improvement. And what I hope is next for DC is that we will be able to do some of the things that those cities did and turn a corner ourselves. The big differences that we see thematically are that those large cities didn't just let their recommendations made by these expert bodies sit on a shelf, they actually implemented them. And that looked like meaningful investment in violence prevention, significant amounts of money in prevention. And it also meant a whole of government response to crime and not these sort of one-off ad hoc things. What bothers me in part about Secure DC is that it's wrong-headed. But the other thing is that it really gives people the impression that we're moving forward when we're standing still. There's a whole lot of nothing in that bill in addition to the things that are really bad. And so to announce we've done 100 things and none of those things are among those that everybody sat down and said they wanted, said would work, that we've seen work in other places, is really an empty gesture in my view.
So you said a whole lot of nothing in addition to some of the worst provisions. I know we have pre-trial DNA collection. We have drug-free zones, one of which I've seen a picture of recently. We also have the anti-mask mandate. Anything else that people if they don't know about already, they should be aware about?
I'm glad you brought up those provisions because on one side of the equation, it's easy to understand how that could result in violations of people's civil liberties. But what we should also understand is that legally, it's not as much of a difference as it sounds like it is. Believe it or not, it's already illegal to sell drugs. It's already illegal to steal from a store. It's already illegal to commit a crime and wear a mask while you're committing the crime. What we're doing is we're saying, oh, you're going to be charged with 5 things instead of 4 things, or you're going to be charged with 11 things instead of 10 things, and pretending that that's going to make a difference. It's symbolic and it's empty. And what we should be doing is focusing our attention and all of the resources that the city has on those things that are actually going to make a measurable impact.
So going back to the U.S. Attorney's Office, my fault. Go ahead. Sorry. I'm just trying to get a sense from you.
No,
of course,
go ahead, Sam.
I wouldn't want you to speculate, of course, but council members have said that this sounds redundant. And even Council Chairman Mendelson has put the onus on the U.S. Attorney's Office for convictions and, just that side of the coin. What is their end game here in throwing all of these pieces on the wall to see what sticks? What's the end game here for them? Is it just smoke and mirrors, or is it something deeper?
Ironically, I think the end game is to avoid accountability. There's so much discussion about how this bill is going to help us hold people accountable. But in reality, this is just a way for our decision makers to avoid accountability themselves. When I say that the U.S. Attorney's Office is puppeteering the council, what I mean by that is they're making all the decisions about what went into this bill. And although I'm not a person who believes that stiffer enforcement and more prosecution and punishment will do the trick, I think it's important for people to understand that that argument is completely misplaced and that the police are not doing the job that people think they're doing. Our prosecutors are not doing the job that people think that they're doing. And everybody understands that there's low risk of getting caught for the offenses that they're saying are not being criminalized harshly enough. And so when we see this finger pointing game, all of us suffer. All of us who are fighting for the same thing, whatever side of the aisle you're on, all of us are trying to make people safer. We suffer from the inaction and we suffer from the finger pointing and blame game that we've been subject to for the past year, really for the last 40 years. But we've seen a surge, as you said, since 2020 in the last year especially.
So with the U.S. Attorney's Office in the ear of the council,
and other
my apologies, Stacey. Go on ahead, please, by all means.
I'm sorry. I think I cut Sam off. My apologies. I just want to jump in because, Patrice, I'm not certain how versed you are in the crime bills that other jurisdictions like Louisiana, Georgia, and other places have done as well. But we're seeing it going on around the country. And Sam asked a question about the end game there in D.C. What is the overall end game here?
Yeah, I'm familiar with some of what's happening in other states. And it's interesting because every now and then we get a reminder that things could be a lot worse. We see examples in other states of people trying to punish drug sale with the death penalty. I mean, that happened in the last year or two in Arkansas. But we should also recognize that other states that don't have the advantages that we do, a small legislative body, a body that's not bicameral, a body that on paper is not even really bipartisan, they're able to get a lot more done. They're able to move much larger ships. And there are places that are passing laws that are proven to help keep people safe much faster than DC is doing. And what I've learned in the last few years is not just that DC has an opportunity to lead on these issues, but we also act as a ceiling because people look to us as progressive. They look to us as a bastion of hope for the future. And when we don't make progress, when we don't move forward, or when we move in the wrong direction, it makes it harder for people to make progress in other states and in other large cities.
That word progressive,
back to you.
No doubt. Can y'all hear me? That word progressive gets thrown around quite a lot. And from your vantage point, what is the current makeup of the council right now? Because what we saw on the 5th, I believe March 5th, was majority support for a bill that a lot of people in the grassroots can agree is pretty redundant and just draconian in some ways. And this is an election year. A lot of people are concerned about crime, but it seems like we're repeating ourselves from 30 years ago. So is this council really progressive in some ways, or what's happening up there in the Wilson building from your vantage point?
I don't know if we should even be using the word support. I think we saw people vote for something that was not aligned with their conscience. And what we are finding is that people are frustrated with the fact that the things we know will work long term are not happening. And so every time we poll voters in DC, they say that they want those long term investments. They want the things that will actually keep people safe. But what we've also come to recognize is that those things aren't happening. And so in the meantime, we have a real problem with crime. We have a real problem with gun violence. And so we can't do nothing is the refrain. We can't do nothing, we can't do nothing, we can't do nothing, which is not what anyone's proposing. What we ended up with is we can't do nothing, so we'll punish the poor. We'll just keep doing the same thing that we know won't work. And that's what's fed to the public is this false choice. Do you want us to do nothing at all? Or do you want us to do something that we know will fail? And then we celebrate doing the thing that we know will fail. And I don't think that that's real support. I think that's reluctantly voting for something because you're between a rock and a hard place and nobody will do the thing that they know will actually work.
And it's, I appreciate you bringing that up because before he made his vote president, Councilmember Trayon White spoke at length about the 94 crime bill, about the importing of drugs into the United States, but more recently, his attempts to pass record sealing or to introduce record sealing legislation and just other pieces of legislation that he said got shelved. To your point about just the long-term solutions being tabled and not really being funded. We are in the midst of budget season. What does the ideal budget look like in terms of long-term crime prevention? What does it look like from your vantage point?
No, I agree with the recommendations made by the Fair Budget Coalition. We're a member of that coalition, and I think they do a good job of speaking to not only what's important for public safety, but how do we balance budget priorities across the board for the people that we're trying to help? Because there is, only so much money to go around in theory. And so looking at their recommendations really helps me to understand, as somebody who's got a deep understanding of what's needed for public safety, to see what's needed for education, what's needed for housing, what's needed for the other things that we know will keep people safe aside from our criminal justice institutions. And so I really like following along with those fiscal experts when budget season comes around. But what I would like to point out is that a lot of the policies that the council passes don't have any force and effect until they're funded. So you mentioned record sealing earlier. DC Council passed the Second Chance Act years ago, and the mayor didn't sign it, and she also didn't fund it. And so we remain having one of the most draconian opportunities for record sealing and expungement in the country. And that's dangerous at a time that people need jobs coming out of a pandemic. We can't describe it as separate from public safety. It's one and the same. We know that jobs keep people from recidivism. And when we refuse to give them jobs and then we throw our hands up and say, why is crime getting worse? That's just shirking responsibility in my view. So we need to fund the things that were passed because those things went through a process, unlike the process of the U.S. Attorney's Office just writing a bill and having it passed, despite a lot of public opposition to it.
It just seems, Sam, that and hearing Attorney Patrice say what she just said about that particular legislation, it just seems that we're seeing more and more Democrats as well become really conservative with, or seem to be more conservative in their politics with these things, particularly when it comes to crime bills.
Yeah, I think there are groups that are conservative that would disagree with that. DC Justice Lab is, of course, a nonpartisan organization, but we do track what's going on and who's leading what in different places. And what you'll notice is that there are a lot of conservative arguments for criminal justice reform that are winning in other places. Fiscal conservative arguments, but also just shared values. Even ALEC, has legislation that would reduce mass incarceration. And so when I say progressive, I don't really mean by political party. What I mean are the things that are moving us forward, whoever it is that's going to champion that cause. So I think that DC deserves to have a more progressive agenda championed by the people who have all uniformly run on a platform of doing that. Nobody who's sitting in office in DC won on a platform that said we want to keep things the same.
Yeah.
Question for you, Attorney Sultan. What is your advice to grassroots organizers as it relates to getting a progressive bill introduced and funded? What would real organizing look like to proactively do something of that nature that is on the same level as Secure DC?
You know, what I've noticed during my 20 years or so in DC is that we do a good job as a community of organizing around specific issues one at a time. But we don't have the same kind of mobilization effort or movement that we see in cities that don't have as transient a population as here. And so when we understand that our criminal justice system is almost entirely DC natives, right? It's almost entirely people who grew here, not people who flew here. And to mobilize those people who are most directly affected around a philosophy and around a group of principles that can sustain from one issue to the next instead of having to regroup over and over again, I think would be a really positive change. But make no mistake, the work that's being done on the ground is powerful, it's meaningful, and even absent changing legislation, it matters. Those are the people that are changing the discourse. They're changing our collective tolerance and intolerance of certain behaviors. And those are the people that should be championed all the time. It's nice to have the amplification of these issues nationally, but it's not a substitute. We really need both. We really need all eyes on DC, inside the district and outside the district, in my opinion.
Follow-up question for you. To what degree would you say organizers on the ground represent the native DC population? Or to what degree would you say that native Washingtonians are plugged in with those organizers?
I think we have a diverse advocacy community in DC. I think we have people who are from here who are organizing. We have people who work here professionally as advocates, where that's their day job, who are very vocal on legislation. And we have people who are looking at the nation's capital, both in sort of that leadership role that I mentioned before, but also because we are a political football for Congress at this point in time. All of the culture wars come to Washington, D.C. because we don't have real meaningful control or local autonomy. And so that has led to, we have people who have never set foot in DC who are critical of DC Justice Lab's work. And if they don't know what we do, then they certainly don't know what people on the ground are doing. So, I think that multi-layered approach is important, but it also can lead to some confusion and conflation sometimes. And so, I think you have all of those things. I don't think we just have like one dynamic.
It's a very interesting point you bring up.
I'm sorry. It's interesting because again, how much of this can be the problems DC has can be solved simply with statehood?
That's a great question. I think statehood would go a long way. I think it would benefit all of us to know that the decisions our elected leaders are making are based on what the electorate wants them to do and not based on their fear of what they will be allowed to do or not allowed to do. I think Brooke Pinto admonishing and lecturing really her colleagues about congressional interference, when ironically, she is the one who ushered in this era of congressional interference, if we recall, November and December of 2022, was really misplaced. I don't think it's appropriate to tell the residents of Washington, D.C. that they can't have what they want, that you won't fight for what we want, that you are going to bend to the whim of Congress. Strategically, if they want to do that in their own horse trading behind the scenes, maybe that's one thing, but to publicly state that we are going to listen to and follow the will of people who don't live here was absolutely inappropriate and wrong.
Yes, Sam?
Very good point. So in terms of, and we've spoken about this before, but I was just hoping to see if you could just, tell our audience, what does this issue, or focusing on this issue, how does this affect the rest of the DC Justice Lab's work? The more holistic part. How does, focusing on this, how does it affect the rest of your work, if that makes sense?
Sure. So our work really involves two different lanes. I mean, we have our own policy agenda, which really focuses on limiting state violence because we know that state violence drives community violence and makes it worse. But we also have taken on this role in DC of working as movement lawyers alongside other people and making sure that policymaking is accessible to everyone. We had in our first couple of years, so many Black-led organizations say, oh, I wish we had a policy arm, or I wish we had policy staff. And we said, you got it. That's us. Like, we will help you with whatever you want to write, whatever you want to see passed. And I just think that's such an important part of our work. And so that's just going to become a bigger and bigger part of our work going forward, the training and research piece, in addition to the advocacy piece that most people know us for.
Last question for the time being. We would love to have you on the program, and you and I, we talk, of course, but if you can just delve into what type of policy research you're currently doing. I'm pretty sure our audience is very curious about that.
Sure. So we have this small geographic focus on Washington, D.C., but a really broad issue area focus. And I'd love to have people direct their attention to DC Justice Lab's library on our website. And you can see there all of the issues that we've studied kind of laid out in these buckets of policing, prosecution, and punishment. And what I'd love to highlight as well is that our DC Justice Fellows, our very first class, are working on some really exciting projects. They're working on things around reparations. They're working on probation reform. They're working on decriminalizing sex work. They're working on alternatives to issuing warrants for people. And so those are campaigns that I'm excited to see unfold in the coming weeks and months, as well as the work that we've been doing around eliminating mandatory minimums, ending solitary confinement, and limiting the authority of police to inflict violence and harm on our communities.
Wow. This is, some just fabulous information, Attorney Patrice Sulton, DC Justice Lab, and we know you guys do great work. And it's just a pleasure to just be, I'm truly the fly on the wall between a conversation between you and the great Sam P.K. Collins. This is amazing. Folks, keep up with what the DC Justice Lab is doing. They have a whole website, as you would expect, and they are social media savvy as well. You see them on social media as well. And of course, Sam, you can catch at the WashingtonInformer.com and all over Twitter. You can really stay abreast to everything DC by checking out Sam on Twitter as well. Sam, want to drop your handle, please?
It's pretty simple. My handle is at Sam PK Collins, and that is across all platforms. Sam PK COLLINS.
And Attorney Patrice Sulton at DC Justice Lab, and the website, Attorney Patrice?
So we are at DC Justice Lab on all platforms, and it's dcjusticelab.org. dcjusticelab.org. Thanks, both of you, so much for bringing this needed conversation to our platform. Really educated this morning, as we expect it to be, and hopefully we'll have you both again soon. We appreciate you. And everybody, go to YouTube and hit subscribe at the LIBK-News, Let It Be Known News channel. Hit subscribe and tell your friends about it. We'll see you again tomorrow.